We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
As we approach Donald Trump's second inauguration, lots of things happening on the ground in D.C., least of which is not the confirmation hearings within the Senate committees for his picks for cabinet positions. Now, we're very fortunate to have with us today Liberty Nation's national security correspondent and fount of all knowledge on things D.C. and Foggy Bottom, Mr. Dave Patterson. Thanks for being here, Dave.
Hi, Mark. Good to be with you.
So, Dave, I think the thing that I've noticed being dialed into these hearings for the cabinet positions is that they're the most interesting ones that I've seen in recent history, because normally they're fairly bipartisan despite some probing questions. But this time, there's very much a straight line divide. The Republicans are in support, the Democrats are against, and there's no real give or take, except perhaps for Marco Rubio, who personally knows the Democrats who are questioning him during the procedure. What's your overall take on the hearings so far?
Well, I think they break pretty much along party lines, and you saw that really a good example of that in the Hegseth hearing. And whereas the Democrats were pretty brutal, the Republicans not so much. I think that it overall, my assessment is that they brought out everything they could possibly bring out with regard to Hegseth's background, what he thinks, and what his motivation is for being there. And in the final assessment, I think that I would say that he did fairly well. He acquitted himself fairly well in a fairly rigorous examination.
Yeah, it specifically for Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense position, it seemed to me that he was the canary in the coal mine for how the Democrat caucus, specifically those on committee, were going to be prosecuting their examination of each of the Trump nominees. And they really did try and throw everything at him. And yet he managed it very, very well, which if you'd believed the reportage coming out of the legacy media, the Fourth Estate, beforehand, would have seemed an impossible task, because they had such confidence that he was completely going to be destroyed by the committees. And that really wasn't the case. And bit of history for you, Dave, and I'm sure you know this. Coming out of, obviously, committees are where nominees go to die, if they're going to die or thrive. And once it gets out into the full floor vote, I think there's only one who's ever lost a floor vote after committee, and that was John Towers under George H.W. Bush, 1989. John Tower. And he had a bit of a reputation as a somewhat creepy womanizer and heavy drinker. And he lost 53-47 in a Republican-controlled Senate. And I don't think we're going to see that again, although we may see that exact figure in terms of the nomination, 53-47, which is the Republican balance of power. Do you think we'll have any surprises in terms of people withdrawing after their committee hearings as we go forward?
No, I don't. I think that, and the reason is because Trump, in nominating these folks, has put so much of himself into them. I mean, it's not like he's wavering on any of these candidates. And I think that message has gone to the Senate Majority Leader, and consequently, what Donald Trump wants as the president is going to be very much motivating in terms of how the senators vote.
Okay, so we expect pretty much everybody to be confirmed. I guess that's the way this is heading at the moment. I mean, most of them are very pro forma. Marco Rubio, for example, at the State Department, he knows everybody. Everybody knows him. It's going to go through, and there'll probably be a fair bit of bipartisan support for that. I would expect at least 70 votes in the full Senate for that. But there still are a couple at time of recording. There are still a couple of more contentious ones, specifically Kash Patel and Kash Patel and RFK Jr., do you think they will go with the ease that we've seen, for example, the Pam Bondi and the Marco Rubio here?
I don't. No, I don't. I mean, I think that they're going to face some headwaters in terms of the Democrats and their questioning. I think that Kash Patel, particularly because he's sort of a lightning rod and has been, will get some special attention from the Democrats. But at the same time, I don't think that since they don't have the majority in the hearing, I mean, it's going to be a lot of bluster, and it's going to be on the floor that you find the support. I think that the concern, it's interesting, the concern the Democrats have about the candidates is the very behavior that the Democrats and their lawfare implemented against Trump.
Mm.
And so you've got this projection going that is quite remarkable.
Yeah, that was especially apparent during the Pam Bondi hearings. But actually, I'm going to come back to the Hegseth one here because I think it plays into what you were just saying. And there's certain expectations that, and this is true when Republicans are in the minority and having to confirm Democrat cabinet picks as well. This is true both sides, whatever the bout. But there's a sort of expectation, and I kept hearing during Pete Hegseth's committee meeting that you don't have the experience to manage 3 million people, and therefore you're not qualified for the position. And I'm thinking, well, who does? Right? Who does? It's not because there's almost this vision. It's like, so Pete Hegseth has to speak to 3 million people on a daily basis, and he hasn't done that before. And it's really it's fascinating that people would buy into this, and that the media would project that as, well, this is obviously true, because Pete Hegseth might, if he is confirmed, if he does get the position, he might have to speak to a group of 12 to 15 people who are all supposedly good, competent managers who will then speak to their little groups of people, who will then speak to their little groups of people, all the way down. I hate to say it's a pyramid scheme. It's a pentagon pyramidal scheme. But it's not as though he actually has to deal with 3 million people and on an individual basis. And this, to me, it really highlights that the expectations of what these cabinet secretaries and cabinet position people do is not really understood by the general public.
That is exactly right. There are very few people who have enough time inside the Pentagon to really grasp the culture and to really grasp how it works. And I always go back to this notion of, you've heard about the iron majors. Mm. Well, there's a reason why the iron majors at the lowest levels of action in the Pentagon are so successful. And that's because they don't know what they can't do. Now, as you get higher in the pyramid, it becomes more and more apparent how limited you are. But the iron majors don't know that. And so they get a lot done. So you are exactly right. If you can make your vision and your communication crystal clear to the roughly 15 to 20, what there are known as the principal staff assistants. Those are the people who report directly to the Secretary of Defense, the Undersecretary for Policy, for Acquisition, for Comptroller. All of these folks, if you make very clear what you want, hold them to a standard, establish milestones, check those milestones, those are the people you have to manage, not 3 million. Mm. And it's an interesting, it's a hierarchical phenomenon. The people who know the most about any single issue are the people at the very bottom. The people who know the least are at the very top. The decision rights are at the very top, and the least decision rights are at the very bottom. So you have decision rights being carried out by the people who know the least.
Which actually speaks positively towards Hegseth's nation, really, doesn't it?
It really does. And he said, he's a change agent. He is a disruptor. And that's what's needed. When Donald Rumsfeld first came in to the the second time he came into the Department of Defense, his challenge was, as you may recall, was transformation. He was all about transformation. And in fact, he requested an additional $18 billion so that he could carry out transformation. Then 9/11 came, and that kind of was the end of that. But the fact is that Rumsfeld was a disruptor. He changed the nature of the PPBS system to execution, which he thought was missing. And well, Hegseth is going to be the very same thing, but he's going to be the same thing differently, if that makes any sense. And he does come with this mandate. He believes, and so does Trump, that the lowest level of the warfighter has been forgotten. And it's true. They're the pawns. They're the objects of the social justice experiments. And interestingly enough, they've reacted negatively, and they're not re-enlisting. They're not enlisting to begin with. And it's interesting, and Liberty Nation is going to be coming out with an article here shortly about the phenomenon of even slightly before Donald Trump was elected, enlistments started to increase with the anticipation that you'd have a new sheriff in town.
Yes, it's the military is getting back to, and I believe this is probably true, that the military is getting back to an ethos of a warrior code with a lethal mentality, which is pretty much all you want from your armed forces, surprisingly enough. We're going to be back with Dave Patterson after this short break. Don't go anywhere.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.